The tractor let out a mechanical howl as it slammed to a sudden halt, skidding sideways and hurling Colton Briggs forward against the wheel. A storm of dust exploded around him as the thermos of bitter coffee flew from its holder and clattered to the floor. For a few seconds, everything was a blur of adrenaline and confusion. Then came the silence, the kind that follows something gone terribly wrong. Colton jumped down into the dirt, the hot Wyoming sun already beating down on the back of his flannel shirt. His boots crunched into the gravel and grass as he surveyed the undercarriage of his tractor. Twisted around the axle was a bright orange fiber optic cable, its synthetic coating shredded like a snake that had lost a fight. It didn't belong there. He hadn't laid anything in that part of the field. No markers, no flags, no permits, just open land, the kind he'd plowed 100 times over. And yet, here it was, thick industrial-grade cable strung underground like it had always belonged, snaking through the soil as if his land were nothing but a thoroughfare. He tried yanking it loose. It wouldn't budge. Heart pounding, Colton grabbed his phone and rushed to the barn office at the edge of the property. Inside, the air was stale, the old monitor flickering as he pulled up security footage from earlier in the week. His camera caught everything. 2 white, unmarked trucks arriving just before dawn, the kind used by contractors who preferred discretion over legality. Men in reflective vests climbed out with equipment already in hand. They didn't knock. They didn't pause. They simply started digging. It had all happened 3 days ago. Colton watched, stunned, as they carved a trench straight across his land. In less than 4 hours, the cable had been laid, the trench refilled, the evidence buried. Still reeling, he placed a call to someone who had always been half conspiracy theorist, half prophet, his cousin, Vanessa Briggs. Land use attorney by day, doomsday prepper by night. If something shady happened within 100 miles, Vanessa probably had a folder on it. She showed up with a coffee stronger than diesel and her laptop already booted up. Colton didn't even need to explain. She'd already heard whispers about Northview Community Council overreaching into private parcels. But this, she said, this was something else. Together, they traced the cable route and matched it to the NCC's latest community improvement plan. That's when they found the first clue, a tiny plastic tag hanging from the cable, etched with the logo of SummitLink Communications. Vanessa dug deeper, burning through property records, zoning databases, county filings. Nothing had been submitted. No utility easement. No notice of work. No permission from the landowner. But the real bombshell came when she discovered the lease agreement. Apparently, the NCC had partnered with SummitLink, providing them unauthorized access to run fiber optic infrastructure across Colton's land. In exchange, SummitLink paid the HOA a recurring fee, money that never touched Colton's bank account. They were profiting off his land. Legally, financially, and morally, it was theft. No different than if they had leased out his barn for a rave without telling him and pocketed the door fee. And the worst part? They assumed he'd never notice. By sundown, Colton wasn't angry anymore. He was cold, focused. A switch had flipped. That night, while most of Mountain Hollow slept, Colton sat in the glow of his barn office monitor, drafting a plan that would turn the HOA's power grab into their undoing. If they wanted a cable war, they were about to get one. He started simple. Bright yellow flags were planted every 20 feet along the cable's path. Bold wooden signs followed, declaring private property, unauthorized utility use will be prosecuted. Some included QR codes linking to a blog post he'd thrown together, complete with video footage of the trespassers, timestamps, and aerial overlays of the illegal trench. Within 24 hours, it had over 10,000 views from within the county. And then came the unexpected call. Bryce Atwood, an old childhood friend, now CEO of FreedomNet Fiber, a rival ISP. Bryce had tried for years to penetrate Mountain Hollow's HOA-controlled market, but was consistently blocked. Until now. You cracked the wall wide open, man, he said, still laughing. Colton didn't waste time. He offered Bryce something no ISP had: legal access to prime land at the edge of the HOA's coverage. Bryce agreed immediately. They drafted a deal within days. FreedomNet would lay its own cable along Colton's property line, install a junction node, and service the entire neighborhood with triple the speed at half the cost. No throttling. No HOA markup. Colton called it Operation Bandwidth Breakout. Signs went up. Flyers went out. Mailboxes filled with bold blue ads that read, "Better Internet. No HOA middlemen. Coming soon." The reaction was instant. Some neighbors cheered. Others grumbled. A few accused Colton of betraying the greater good. But most were curious. Internet speeds had been spotty for years, and monthly bills always suspiciously high. Suddenly, the veil lifted. Colton became a quiet legend almost overnight, not by campaigning, not by shouting, but by showing people how badly they'd been fleeced. But the Northview Community Council wasn't done. Karen, their clipboard-wielding president, made her entrance soon after. Her SUV pulled into his driveway like a declaration of war. With her trademark smile stretched tight and condescending, she approached the field. "Oh, good. You found the installation," she said cheerfully, as if he'd unearthed a hidden gift. Colton didn't respond with anger. He didn't need to. The documentation already lived online. The pressure was mounting, and Karen, for all her performative calm, was starting to crack. But she didn't know that the game was no longer about cables or even property lines. It was about power and who controlled the flow of it. And for the first time in years, it wasn't her. By the end of the week, Colton's once quiet field had transformed into a war zone, not of bullets or fire, but of signal strength and strategic positioning. FreedomNet Fiber's trucks rolled in early each morning, moving with the precision of a military operation. Technicians clean-cut, fast-moving, clearly briefed, drove stakes, laid conduits, and assembled a bright silver junction box right beside the old cable path. It was all completely legal, meticulously documented, and very, very public. Every move was designed not just to build infrastructure, but to broadcast a message. This land is not yours, and neither is the control that came with it. And that message? It hit hard. Colton's inbox began to flood. At first, it was just neighbors asking about the new internet service. Then came the confessions, residents who had always suspected something was off about the HOA's exclusive ISP deal. One man, Jeff, who had lived in Mountain Hollow for over a decade, admitted he'd been paying nearly $130 a month for barely passable service. "They always said it was the best option," he wrote. "Turns out it was just the only one they let us have." But not everyone appreciated Colton's campaign. Passive-aggressive notes began appearing on his mailbox. One was written in red marker and simply read "Traitor." Another was more poetic, stating, "Your actions affect everyone, not just yourself." He suspected it was Karen, or one of her loyalists, trying to rattle him. If it was supposed to slow him down, it failed miserably. The final straw came on a damp Thursday evening. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the motion sensors Colton had installed near the trench sent an alert to his phone. He opened the live feed and watched, almost amused, as three shadowy figures crept through the field like cartoon burglars. One held a shovel. Another appeared to carry a clipboard. They moved cautiously until the sprinkler system, recently upgraded with industrial-strength valves, activated. The water hit them square in the face, followed by a chorus of shrieks and curses. One figure slipped in the mud and landed flat on their back. The others scattered, slipping, tripping, abandoning the trench entirely. Colton saved the footage immediately. The next morning, it was anonymously uploaded to the neighborhood Facebook group. The comments section exploded. Some laughed, calling it the best surveillance win of the year. Others debated whether the intruders were HOA members or desperate saboteurs. A few even began to question Karen directly. "Why are we fighting a legal option that offers better service?" One post asked. "Why didn't we vote on the original ISP contract?" asked another. But the most damning blow didn't come from sprinklers or social media. It came from within the HOA itself. A man named Ernie Calloway, quiet, retired, mostly known for handing out cookies at holiday events, sent Colton an unmarked manila envelope. Inside were dozens of pages. Internal emails, meeting minutes, invoice breakdowns, a list of dates, signatures, financial figures. All of it pointed to one thing. The HOA had been knowingly collecting fees from SummitLink and using Colton's land without disclosure or consent. They had made tens of thousands of dollars. Colton didn't hesitate. He bought a domain, fiberfraudwatch.com, and uploaded every file. He annotated the documents, provided video evidence, and created an interactive timeline that walked viewers step by step through the timeline of the betrayal. It was clean, professional, cold as steel. Within 24 hours, the site went viral in Mountain Hollow. Some residents were shocked. Others were furious. And a few were ready for revolution. When the next HOA meeting was called, the community center overflowed. What was meant to be a routine update turned into something closer to a mutiny. Residents came with printouts from the website, screenshots of the emails, and hard questions. Karen stood at the podium, her usual composure stretched thin. She began with the usual scripted confidence, talking about misinformation and unity. But then Jeff, the same man who had emailed Colton weeks ago, stood and raised his voice. How much money did the HOA make from leasing land you didn't own? The room fell silent. Karen faltered, visibly shaken. Someone else shouted, "Where's the money now?" Another demanded to see the board's bank records. Then came a chant, low and rumbling at first, but building, "Vote her out. Vote her out." Within minutes, someone formally moved to remove Karen from the presidency. The motion passed unanimously. Karen left the building with no parting words, her face blank, her clipboard forgotten on the podium. Greg, a former board member who had resigned weeks earlier, stepped back in as treasurer. Jeff took over communications, and Colton, to his surprise, was invited to be an official advisor to the new board. He accepted, under one condition: all infrastructure projects must require full community voting and documented landowner consent. A week later, Bryce returned with an idea. His company had grown rapidly, and the success of the Mountain Hollow project was drawing attention. He proposed installing a permanent microstation on Colton's land, solar-powered, low-profile, and capable of servicing 3 additional neighborhoods. In exchange, equity, a long-term lease, and a seat on the company's advisory board. Colton agreed. Ground broke the next morning. Karen's old house was sold at a loss to a young couple who immediately installed lawn gnomes and renamed their Wi-Fi network HOAF. Rumors swirled that she tried to join another HOA across town, but someone had sent them a link to fiberfraudwatch.com. Her application went nowhere. The new microstation rose from the earth like a monument, not to victory, but to vigilance. Colton stood at the edge of the field one evening, watching the sun dip behind the horizon. The old orange cable was still buried, left there for legal reasons. A hand-painted sign nearby marked the location. Caution, former HOA ego zone. Someone had doodled Karen's face on it in permanent marker. Colton didn't erase it. Not because he held a grudge, but because he believed in monuments. Not the kind made of marble or granite, but the kind that told a story. The kind that warned others, if you take what doesn't belong to you, someone might just use it to bury you. The letter arrived on a Friday, thick, embossed, formal. It wasn't handwritten or addressed with any emotion, just clean Helvetica font, like it had been printed by a machine that had no idea it was delivering a declaration of war. Colton opened the envelope on his porch, boots up on the railing, the faint hum of FreedomNet's freshly activated microhub murmuring in the background like a satisfied engine. Vanessa was already there, sipping lemonade and scanning the documents before he even finished pulling out the last page. She let out a sharp laugh that startled the chickens. "The HOA is suing you," she said, grinning wide. "Obstruction of community infrastructure, unauthorized business operations, and, wait for it, willful disruption of collective agreements." Colton raised an eyebrow. Did they just invent charges using a word cloud? Apparently, they had also tried to reclassify his field as shared community access land. As if by simply typing it into a Word document, they could erase 100 years of deeded ownership. Vanessa stood up, took her laptop, and muttered something about ripping them apart with zoning codes and precedent law like Christmas wrapping paper. Colton didn't say much. He just walked out to the barn, pulled up a stool, and started reviewing the evidence again. The camera footage. The internal documents from Ernie. The contract with SummitLink, signed in the dead of night without a single public vote. The payout logs. The profit margins. All of it was there. They hadn't just trespassed. They built an entire shadow economy on top of his soil and expected him not to notice. When court day came, Colton wore clean jeans and a checked button-up. Vanessa came in all black, her briefcase practically vibrating with paperwork. Karen arrived, wearing a blue blazer that was clearly 2 sizes too small, flanked by the last 2 loyalists who hadn't resigned. Their lawyer looked like someone who'd Googled how to sue a landowner that morning. It was pitiful. They tried to paint Colton as a selfish obstructionist, the kind of person who stood in the way of progress. Their attorney used the phrase Community Enhancement Initiative as if it were a magic spell that would erase the fact they never even knocked on his door. Then Vanessa stood up, and the courtroom changed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pace or posture. She simply presented. Permit records, 0. Easement filings, none. Utility surveys, never conducted. Profit disclosures, hidden. Tax filings, falsified. And then came the video. The security footage of the contractors rolling in at dawn, trenching through private property like it was a public park. The email from Karen herself, discussing the deal and profit expectations. The social media chaos. The resident backlash. The footage of Karen and board members sneaking onto the property and being chased off by Colton's camera and voice, reminding them they were trespassing on private land. When the judge finally spoke, it was with the kind of weariness that only decades of property disputes could produce. "Did you consult the property owner at any point?" he asked Karen directly. She cleared her throat and replied, "We assumed community interest overrode individual claims." "That's not how land ownership works," the judge cut in. With a single ruling, everything flipped. The HOA's lawsuit was dismissed entirely. Colton's countersuit was granted in full standing. The Northview Community Council was found liable for trespass, fraud, misuse of community funds, and failure to disclose taxable income from the unauthorized fiber lease. Fines were levied. Damages awarded. The HOA was ordered to terminate its contract with SummitLink immediately, which cut off their primary source of secret revenue. Colton didn't cheer. He just nodded. That night, as he poured himself a whiskey and stepped onto the porch, he got a call. The voice on the other end was professional, measured, and very cautious. It was a regional executive from SummitLink. He wanted to talk. They met the next day in the barn office. Two men in suits arrived, looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. They came not to fight, but to plead. The unauthorized installation on Colton's land, they admitted, was a significant legal exposure. If Colton chose to file for full removal of the line, over 100 residents would lose service instantly. Public relations would implode. Lawsuits would follow. They asked what he wanted. Colton didn't flinch. He offered a deal, lease the line from him directly at 3 times the original rate. Terminate the agreement with the HOA. Acknowledge in writing that the previous contract was invalid and entered in bad faith. Add a public apology and legal indemnity clause. They hesitated. He pointed out the field. 1 shovel, 20 minutes, that whole box is gone, he said, gesturing at the splice point buried under soft soil. But I'd rather get paid than get even. They signed 2 days later. With that, Colton became the only person in the region leasing bandwidth to 2 ISPs, FreedomNet and SummitLink. One relationship built on trust. The other, on leverage. Either way, the monthly checks made him more than his entire hay crop ever had. Bryce was thrilled. He gave Colton an official title, Strategic Land Advisor, and a generous equity package. Colton joked about ordering custom business cards with Fiber Mobile printed in bold across the top. It was supposed to be a joke, but the town started calling him that anyway. And Karen? She unraveled like wet paper in a thunderstorm. She filed noise complaints about the installation crews, claimed the junction box clashed with the aesthetic of the community. At one point, she even alleged that Colton was secretly operating an unlicensed data center in his barn. He responded with a video tour. It featured 3 servers, 1 router, and a chicken feeder duct taped to a wall. The video went viral on local Facebook groups. The comments were merciless. Memes were born. One showed Karen as a medieval inquisitor chasing a Wi-Fi signal with a flaming torch. Colton didn't post it. He didn't have to. The community had turned. A few weeks later, he hosted an open field day, free drinks, local food, lawn chairs, a presentation from Bryce explaining how fiber optic systems worked. Kids ran around waving tiny FreedomNet flags. One little girl named the microhub Freedom Tower. The name stuck. Jeff gave a speech. Greg grilled hot dogs. Someone brought homemade cupcakes with lightning bolts made of frosting. Colton stood by the new hub as the sun set behind it, casting long shadows across the field. This had once been dirt. Just dirt. But now it was a cornerstone. A monument to fighting back. What had started with a ruined tractor had become a movement. And what came next would shake HOAs across the state. Karen was silent for almost 2 weeks. For a woman who once sent out HOA violation warnings over mailbox paint colors and measured lawn height with a ruler, her absence was unsettling. Colton figured she was licking her wounds or drafting some grand defense. But when the email came through, it was somehow worse than he expected. Subject: Emergency NCC meeting. Immediate attendance requested. Location: Northview Community Center. Time: 6:30 p.m., Thursday. Colton showed up out of sheer curiosity. Vanessa tagged along with popcorn literally. Bryce came too, in full FreedomNet polo like a sponsor at a tech expo. They didn't expect a crowd, but when they arrived, the parking lot was full. Inside, the community center buzzed with quiet tension. Lawn chairs scraped the linoleum. Seniors whispered. Teenagers filmed on their phones. A banner that once read "Northview Together" hung limply over the podium. Karen stood at the front, whiteboard behind her, face drawn and voice trembling with faux sincerity. Her eyes scanned the crowd for sympathy and found none. "This community is under siege," she began. "Our unity has been compromised by individuals who do not understand the importance of collective structure." Vanessa elbowed Colton. "She's going full cult leader," she whispered. Karen tapped the whiteboard with a dried-out marker. A poorly drawn diagram showed a box labeled Internet Hub. Danger, surrounded by what appeared to be Wi-Fi waves and birds. "The new installation," she announced, "is emitting electromagnetic interference. Residents have reported headaches, dog agitation, and one neighbor's parakeet is refusing to sing." Someone in the back laughed. Loudly. Karen ignored it and forged ahead. "I'm also hearing rumors, unconfirmed, but deeply concerning, that the fiber junction is connected to out-of-state servers which may be collecting personal data. We have no control over what is being transmitted." Colton nearly choked. This wasn't strategy anymore. This was flailing. Jeff stood up. "Karen, how much money did the HOA make from the illegal deal with SummitLink?" The room froze. Karen blinked. I don't have those numbers in front of me," she said. Ernie, seated off to the side, cleared his throat and stood. "Yes, she does. And for the record, it was $48,000 over 2 years. None of it disclosed to residents." A wave of voices rose, shouts, accusations, calls for records. One woman held up a printed screenshot of the fiberfraudwatch.com site. Another waved a flyer that read, "Our Internet. Our voice." Karen tried to restore order. Her voice cracked. She knocked the whiteboard over. The marker bounced across the floor. The room had turned fully against her. Then someone called for a vote. The motion to remove Karen from her position as NCC president passed unanimously. No tears. No protests. She simply gathered her clipboard, turned her back, and walked out to the echo of sarcastic applause. By the weekend, she had moved out. Word spread that she sold her house below market value to a young couple who immediately installed a skate ramp in the driveway and a 10-foot inflatable flamingo in the front yard. Their Wi-Fi network was named HOA Free Zone. With Karen gone, the HOA restructured itself from the ground up. Greg came back, reluctantly, as treasurer. Jeff was voted communications chair. The NCC bylaws were rewritten, requiring 75% resident approval for any infrastructure project involving private land. Vanessa reviewed every line. Colton, of course, was named infrastructure advisor on one condition, that every vote, record, and meeting was publicly posted and transparent. But the biggest change was still to come. One crisp morning, Bryce showed up with coffee and a drone shot. On his tablet, he displayed a map of Mountain Hollow and 3 surrounding neighborhoods. In the center, Colton's field. In bold letters, proposed regional microhub expansion. "I want to turn your land into the beating heart of northern Wyoming's internet," he said. The idea was simple: a solar-powered, climate-controlled microstation that could serve 4 neighborhoods, bypass every HOA, and create redundancy for rural schools and emergency services. It wouldn't just be fast, it would be reliable, secure, and community-owned. Colton didn't even hesitate. Construction began that same week. The foundation was poured beside the Freedom Tower, as the kids still called it. Modular racks arrived on the back of flatbeds. Engineers set up a security system Colton swore was more advanced than what he saw in the military. The microhub rose like a sleek metal spine against the open sky. On opening day, the neighborhood turned out in full force. Folding chairs, coolers, barbecue grills. Kids painted routers on their cheeks. One booth gave away mini Ethernet cables as keychains. Jeff gave a speech about transparency. Vanessa gave a legal workshop titled, "How Not to Get Sued by Your HOA." And Bryce? He presented a slideshow, ending with a freeze frame from the viral sprinkler video where Karen was mid-stumble, mouth open in horror. The field that once carried nothing but hay now carried data. Colton stood back, arms folded, watching it all. He hadn't set out to change anything. He just wanted his land respected. But somewhere between the broken tractor and the lawsuit, he had become something else, a symbol that even the most entrenched systems could be uprooted with the right mix of evidence, stubbornness, and well-timed public exposure. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the field. Colton's land had gone from being just dirt in the eyes of an entitled council to becoming the backbone of freedom in the community. And in that moment, he didn't feel like a rebel or a troublemaker. He felt like a landowner who had simply reminded the world, "This is mine. You don't get to take it just because you think I won't fight back." The microhub had been operational for nearly 3 months when Colton realized he could no longer take a walk through town without being stopped. People waved, handed him business cards, asked for advice on zoning laws, or just wanted to shake his hand. A group of kids even asked for a photo once, calling him the Cable Cowboy. It was absurd and strangely satisfying. The nickname stuck harder than he expected. Someone printed stickers. Local tech bloggers wrote articles. FreedomNet leaned into the branding. Colton, for his part, embraced it just enough to be amusing without letting it go to his head. He still wore the same old flannel, still drove the same dusty pickup, and still checked his fences every morning with a coffee in one hand and his boots wet from morning dew. But the world around him had changed. Bryce's company exploded. After the Mountain Hollow project became public record and public spectacle, other neighborhoods started reaching out. The model was simple: work around restrictive HOAs by partnering directly with private landowners who had the legal right to install microhubs. Within weeks, 3 more fields across the state were earmarked for expansion. Each one cited Colton's case as the catalyst. Meanwhile, fiberfraudwatch.com transformed into more than just a document archive. Vanessa added tools for residents to check easements, request records, and even connect with legal advocates. One of the most downloaded PDFs was titled, "So You Found a Cable in Your Field, Now What?" It became a mini-movement. People shared stories, started community audits, and filed complaints. What began as a personal battle had become statewide reform. But the true final chapter came in the form of a check. The HOA, what remained of it, was forced to liquidate several community enhancement projects to pay the damages ordered by the court. Among the casualties, a marble fountain planned for the clubhouse, a high-end yoga studio renovation, and a monument commemorating the neighborhood's founding. Vanessa texted Colton a photo of the final settlement check and wrote, "Consider it your HOA refund, with interest." He didn't spend it on anything flashy. He paved the long dirt road leading to the microhub. He bought new server racks. He upgraded his barn office into a hybrid tech center and storage space for local kids' science projects. One group set up a live-streaming chicken cam, and within a week it had more views than some county officials' campaign ads. Karen, for her part, had vanished. Word was she tried to join another HOA across town, but someone forwarded the board a link to Fiber Fraud Watch and her application hit a mysterious delay. Her old house had a new coat of paint, 2 hammocks on the porch, and Wi-Fi named cable_crisis_avoided. No one missed her. Every once in a while, Colton would pass by the old orange cable route. They'd left it buried, legally inert, like a fossil from a forgotten era. A handmade sign stood nearby with block letters, "Caution, former HOA ego zone." Someone had drawn Karen's face in permanent marker underneath, eyebrows raised in cartoonish disbelief. It hadn't been removed. It wouldn't be. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. Entitlement doesn't always come with shouting or threats. Sometimes it arrives with polite words and a clipboard. It smiles while it takes. It assures you it's acting in the best interest of the community. It tells you not to worry, that everything is handled. Until it's not. Until someone digs a little deeper. As Colton had. He learned that if you scratch the surface of assumed authority, sometimes all you find beneath is arrogance wrapped in procedure. And when that's exposed, when the backroom deals and fake permissions come to light, those who once held power begin to vanish like mist under sunlight. Not with fireworks. Not with riots. But with facts. With cameras. With people choosing to pay attention. The day the final FreedomNet expansion broke ground, Colton hosted one last event in the field. It wasn't official, just a few folding tables, some grilled hot dogs, and a slideshow of greatest hits. The viral sprinkler video played again. Jeff gave a toast. Greg brought fireworks this time. Even Vanessa cracked a smile, rare and valuable as ever. As the sun dipped behind the newly upgraded solar panels and the microhub blinked to life, Colton stood at the edge of the grass. His field, once dismissed as unused, now carried more power, literal and symbolic, than anyone could have guessed. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who remembered a simple truth. Your land is yours. Your voice matters. And sometimes, the only thing standing between you and being steamrolled is your willingness to say, "Not today." The wind picked up. The data flowed. And somewhere beneath the soil, the old cable still slept, unplugged, unwelcome, and forgotten. Just like Karen.